Welcome. We are going to look a little bit at camel today, or Ustrasana, which is a back bend that's kneeling. And so, particularly if you're someone who has sensitive knees, I recommend using a blanket underneath your knees pretty much for the whole practice. And then having a couple of blocks can be really helpful so that we can bring the floor up to you so that your hands have something to balance on and to ground into. And so two blankets, maybe one could be enough. Definitely two blocks if you've got that. And we're going to start in a cross-legged seat with your right shin in front of your left shin. So you might set your blocks up alongside the right and left sides of your mat just so that they're ready. You could, if you need to, sit up on one in your cross-legged seat or put them underneath your knees if that feels helpful. But otherwise, kind of having them up at the top of your mat, ready to go, can be great. So we're going to start again with right shin in front of left shin. And you can go ahead and place your hands on your thighs. And you can either close your eyes fully or cast the eyes down towards the floor just to start to quiet the mind down a little bit. And so we'll start here. And as you're breathing and as you're sitting, kind of noticing for yourself, where does it feel easy to breathe? Or does it feel easy to breathe? Does it feel smooth? Does it feel effortful? Do you feel like you kind of have to pull air into the body and press air out? Is there a lot of tension? And then we're going to play around a little bit with placing the breath. And so a lot of times in yoga practices, they're talking about relaxing the belly and breathing down into the belly. We're going to do something a little bit different. And so while we don't want to gather a lot of tension in the abdomen, we're going to see if you can direct breath into the rib cage. And so if you think about the rib cage, it's a series of bones, right? Stacked 12 from your collarbones, really above your collarbones down to the upper aspect of your abdomen. And so each one of those ribs can move, should move, right? So as you inhale and exhale, see if you feel any movement laterally, so right and left. So see if you just kind of feel anything happening, or maybe you don't, and you sort of notice that the ribs are kind of stuck, right? So we're just trying to direct the breath to the right and left sides into the rib cage and expand that way. And take a few breaths trying to do that. And then notice if you feel any expansion front and back, right? So front into kind of the sternum, back into both the spine and sort of the back of the rib cage. For some of you, that will feel a little easier. For some of that will feel quite challenging. So just kind of notice front back breathing or anterior posterior breathing. And see if you can combine them. So we've got front, back, and right, left. So sort of more circular or circumferential breathing. And again, what feels like it has some access? What feels like it's kind of stuck? And then let's start by opening up a little bit of the side ribs. So as you inhale, reach your arm straight up to the ceiling. And as you exhale, we're going to bring your left hand down to the floor, reach right arm up and over. So you can keep your top arm straight at the elbow so it's not curving, right? It's a straight line. And so as that line of the elbow is lengthened, it's trying to help pull the shoulder blade up a little bit off your rib cage. And because the rib cage and the shoulder blade are in relationship through a series of muscles and fascia, that can sort of help pull some of the ribs away from their neighbors, so to speak. So as you're side bending over to the left, see if you can feel some of your right ribs opening, or if there's a particular area that is quite tight, you could even breathe into that and just spend maybe another minute or so kind of opening in these ribs. And particularly for those of you who are familiar with what camel looks like, because we haven't really talked about it yet, camel's a back bend. And whenever we think about doing a back bend, the easiest part of the bend in your back is in your neck and in your lower back, right? Those are the aspects of your spine that curve backwards the easiest. You would come on up to sit, reach both arms up to the ceiling, switch your legs. So now you've got your left leg in front of your right leg. Inhale, and then exhale, right hand down, left arm up and over. And so in order to diversify your back bend or distribute the back bend, it's important to see if the mid back, the thoracic spine, the area that your ribs attach to, can also participate in the back bend itself. Keep your top arm straight. See if you can pull the shoulder as if you could pull the shoulder sort of off the ribs, right? And see if that can help open each one of the ribs away from their neighbors. And so when we think about how do we access bending in the thoracic spine or the mid back, making sure that the ribs are mobile tends to be actually quite helpful and important. And so we're going to do a little bit of work there just to prepare ourselves. And then inhale, come all the way up to the ceiling. Exhale, bring the hands down onto the knees. And then let's make our way onto hands and knees or quadruped. And so again, if you are someone who experiences some sensitivity in your knees, especially with kneeling, go ahead and place a blanket on top of your mat. It should be super thin because we'll be doing some of the baby cobras with this under your thighs, which is fine. It just makes the back bend a little bit more assertive. And so you can make this blanket as thin as you would like to for comfort. Okay, so now going into our normal cat-cow. So as you inhale, come into your cow spine. So arch your back, lift your sits bones or your tail up towards the ceiling, and allow your chest to sort of reach forward as that helps support the eyes looking maybe forward along the floor, maybe up towards the wall, maybe at this point raising the eyes towards kind of the upper aspect of the wall, depending on how far away it is from you. And then as you hang out in this cow spine, in this back bend, just again, notice, does your lower back arch relatively well in comparison to your mid back, in comparison to your neck? Who bends in this direction with more ease relative to the other aspects of your spine? And it may be hard to feel, just gonna notice. And then as you exhale, let's go into your cat spine. So round your back, drop your head. Tuck your tail under as if you can see where you feel like you get the best rounding, curving, flexion, forward bending. And then again, inhale, cow spine. And notice who likes to go this direction. Might even feel a little bit of belly stretch. That's a good thing. Exhale, round. Inhale, cow. Exhale, cat. And these next two, just notice, do you feel anything occurring in your ribs? Cow. Even if it's even like oh, I wonder where they're opening in cow versus cat. And then go ahead, come into cat. And then we'll find downward facing dog. So tuck the toes, lift the hips, keep the knees quite bent for this first down dog. You might actually need to walk your feet back a step to get your full length of your downward facing dog. And if you don't know what that is, we'll get there, don't worry. And so with the knees really generously bent, see if you can allow your belly to sort of move back towards your thighs as if it could rest on the thighs, and see if that helps you get your hips up a little bit higher
and have the armpits open a little bit broader. Take a couple of breaths, push through the hands. So the arms are really active here, right? And again, you're kind of trying to feel how you can get more, you know, energetic space between your ribs. Next time you inhale, come forward to plank position. So this is a good place if you feel like your shoulders have gone beyond your wrists. Your feet need to move back a little bit. So this is your plank. And this is a good way to set your downward dog up. So once you have your good plank position, keep your hands and your toes where they're at, then lift your hips up and back and come back into downward facing dog. We're gonna do that about 5 times. Again, inhale, come forward to plank position. So your hands and your feet really should be just kind of there, right? You don't need to move them each and every time. Exhale, downward facing dog. Knees bend, hips lift. Inhale, plank position. If you're someone with relatively open hamstrings, you can start to keep the legs straight for down dog, right? Always an option. Inhale, plank. Exhale, down dog. And then this time we'll go through the vinyasa. Inhale, plank. Exhale, lower the knees. Shift your shoulders forward over your fingertips, bend your elbows, slowly lower your torso down to the ground. And so now we're coming into our baby cobra. Inhale, lift the chest. And if you have that blanket under your thighs, that's okay. You want to think about pressing your pelvis down into the floor. You might even be a little bit on the blanket. And then see if you can still feel lower back arching, mid back trying to arch, neck very gently looking into a back bend. Exhale, lower the face. Inhale at the bottom. Exhale, press up and back, hands and knees. Inhale, tuck the toes. Exhale, downward facing dog. Now again, for those of you who have that blanket there, it's fine, leave it. We're gonna walk over it. So you're gonna take a few steps forward, maybe on top of the blanket, and then all the way up to the top of your mat, bending your knees as you need to or just like to. And then find a forward bend at the top of your mat where your hands can be on something. So for many of you, that will mean hands on blocks, highest level, medium level, lowest level. For some of you, it will mean hands on the floor. Totally fine. Any way that supports your body. Bend your knees enough so that you can rest your torso on your thighs. Let that encourage your spine to get even more heavy and let your head really drop so that your neck gets a moment just to kind of not work super hard, right? Your neck works really hard all day long and we want to give it a break here and there. Next time you inhale, come into your flat back. Your knees might stay bent for 1, 2, or all of these flat backs. That's great. Exhale, fold all the way back down. Your legs might lengthen a little bit or not. Again, inhale, flat back, finding as much length from your pelvis all the way through your spine and out the top of your head. Exhale, fold. Inhale, flat back. And exhale, fold. Inhale, reach the arms out to the side, up to the ceiling, upward hand pose. Keep the eyes forward for this first one. And then exhale, let's take the left hand down to the left thigh and slide your left hand down towards the knee, maybe even to the knee, maybe tiny bit beyond the knee. Right arm is going up and over and we're into that side bend again. So just gonna notice in standing, does your side bend feel a little bit more open than it did when we started? You might even shift a little bit of weight into your right foot to lean into a hip side bend as well. Inhale, come back up through the center. Exhale, right hand comes down, left arm goes up and over. Slide the right hand down towards the knee, side bend to the right. Kind of notice, maybe shift a little bit of weight onto your left foot to kind of lean your left hip into the side bend as well. Inhale, come back up through center. Exhale, dive all the way forward over your legs. Standing forward bend, hands could be on the floor or blocks. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. Exhale, fold all the way back down. Drop the head all the way. Inhale, reach the arms out to the side, up to the ceiling, upward hand pose. Exhale, mountain pose. Maybe 2 more like that. Inhale, lift the arms. See if you can think about your body as a slinky that's getting longer. So everything is moving away from itself. Exhale, dive forward over your legs. Folding forward, drop the head. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. Exhale, fold. Inhale, reach the arms out to the side and out to the ceiling, upward hand pose. Exhale, mountain pose. Again, inhale, upward hand pose, arms reach out and up. Get longer between heels and fingertips without arching your back. So this is just getting longer along the axis of your body. Exhale, dive forward over your legs, standing forward bend. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. Exhale, fold. Inhale, reach the arms out to the side and up to the ceiling. Super long heel to fingertip. Exhale, mountain pose. Good. Inhale, lift the arms. And this time, keep the arms up to the ceiling. Start to get that length from heel to fingertip. And see if there's a way to sort of wiggle your rib cage a little bit farther away from your pelvis. It might just be an imagined action, but see if you can think about what you would do to kind of ground your hips into your thighs and into the floor. And then lift the ribs and the head and the shoulders upwards. So you're effectively splitting your body in half. Half of it goes down, half of it goes up. And then from there, allow your eyes to start to gaze maybe up towards the ceiling if you feel okay with that gaze point. And think about your sternum, your breastplate, reaching up in between the space of your hands. And so it's not a huge back bend, but there might be this sense of sort of your chest turning over and on top of your shoulder blades. Just gonna take one more breath in. Exhale, dive all the way forward over your legs, standing forward bend. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. Bend your knees, step your left foot back into your low lunge. So nice big step over that blanket if you're using it, and you're in your low lunge. Take a breath and look forward. Exhale, start to lengthen through your front leg, bow your head down. Your front leg might not lengthen all the way, that's fine. Just gonna start to find a little bit more of that hamstring stretch. Inhale, bend the front knee, look forward. Exhale, pull the hips back. Maybe the the right leg straightens, maybe the head drops. Inhale, low lunge. Exhale, lengthening the front leg, Parshvottanasana, pyramid pose. One more, inhale, low lunge. And then exhale, lengthen. Come back to your low lunge. And then this time we're gonna lower your left knee down onto the blanket. Shift your hips back so that the hips are stacked right over the knee. And then start to walk your hands up on top of your right thigh. So hopefully your back thigh is perpendicular to the floor. So straight up and down, not leaning forward and not sort of pitching back. And then your right leg is probably also sort of at a 90-degree angle at your hip and your knee. Now, as you're here, just gonna take your awareness down into your left kneecap and notice if it's comfortable or not. For me, this is not super comfortable for my left knee. And so what I like to do is rather than just kind of be placed upright in this kneeling position, I like to actually kind of pull my left thigh forward. I'm not moving my knee up off the mat. I'm just sort of like sliding my thigh forward so that when I come upright, I just feel a little bit more placed, right? Sometimes you can also tuck the back toes under. For some people, that is a happier place on their kneecap. Other people, toes pointed is happier. It's going to depend on you. And then you're going to try to take this right leg out to the side off your mat. So you're sort of in a half straddle. So if I turn to face you, my right leg was in front of my hip, and then I'm going to take it out to the side. Now, most of us will be able to balance relatively well on the heel. You're going to try to reach the toes down so that your whole right foot is on the ground. If that creates cramping in the arch of your foot, just do it gentler or flex the toes up. Reach the arms straight up to the ceiling. And then before we go any further, notice if your hips feel like they have to turn to the right. If they do, it means that your right leg is too far out to the side. So you might bring it forward a little bit, right? We want the hips square to the front of your mat. All right, then bring your right hand down onto your thigh. Take a side bend, sliding your right hand down towards the knee, maybe towards the shin. This is called gate pose, Parigasana. And it's just simple side bend, right? We've done a few side bends so far. Now we're just asking the side bend to be in a kneeling position. And then come all the way up, bring both arms up to the ceiling. See if you can step your right foot back in front of you with as much, balance, grace, and control as you can muster. Bring your left hand down, or excuse me, both hands down onto the blocks. Straighten your back leg into your low lunge. Firm up your back thigh to re-engage your quad and settle your kneecap, and then come up into your high lunge. Okay, now in your high lunge, we're gonna bring your hands to your pelvis. And a high lunge is a back bend. Like there's no getting around it, right? Your leg is behind you quite a distance. And so that requires the pelvis to be in a back bending position. So I'm gonna have you bring your hands on your hip bones, bend your back knee, and see if you can feel, if you have access to upright your pelvis completely. For some of you, you won't be able to, that's totally fine. For some of you, you'll be able to actually like fully tuck your pelvis, and then that's great, go for it, right? You might also feel some wobbling. Now, once you have your pelvis tucked, I want you to feel with your hand if your left buttock is engaged or if it's kind of off, right? I want you to engage it as much as you can. So you should feel some tension coming up underneath your fingers, and then slowly start to straighten your back leg without losing that left butt. You will absolutely lose the uprightness of your pelvis. It's just how it is, right? And so keep the left butt engaged, right? Really feel it nice and tight. You want to also tighten your quad. So we've got quad in the front, butt in the back. That's going to help stabilize your back leg, and then reach the arms up to the ceiling. So we're going to just spend another moment or two here. You might just stay balancing and working on that balance. If you feel balanced already and you want to challenge yourself, you're going to do that slinky effect where you pull your rib cage out of your pelvis or away from your pelvis. It's not in your pelvis to begin with, and start to lift your sternum up towards the ceiling and maybe look up towards the ceiling as well. And so what we're trying to do is get as much length in this back bend as possible without losing your left glute and your left quad. So just notice, as you make the motion more complex, who decides not to participate in the stabilization party and who is really good at staying with it. One more breath in. Exhale, bring the hands down around your front foot, maybe on blocks. We're gonna actually take those blocks away to step back into downward dog. So up and over the blanket into downward dog you go. We'll go through vinyasa. Inhale, come forward to plank. Exhale, lower the knees. Inhale, shift your shoulders forward over your fingertips. Exhale, slowly lower yourself down to the floor. Inhale, baby cobra. Exhale, lower. Inhale to prepare. Exhale, move up and back, hands and knees. Inhale, tuck the toes. Exhale, downward facing dog. Let's take 3 breaths here. So again, bending the knees and lifting the hips up and back if that's helpful for you, right? If you need to start straightening the legs to find a little bit more hamstring length, that's great. Just gonna use down dog as a way to find a little bit of stillness. It's certainly not a break, right? So still a lot of activity, but just a little bit of stillness and a little bit of stability. Okay, we're gonna lift your left leg up, down dog splits. Just gonna let it rise. See if you can feel that left buttock active, because this is kind of like a high lunge, sort of, right? So is the left butt actively pulling your left leg up? As you exhale, pull your left foot forward in between your hands. Grab your blocks if you like them. Take a breath in as you look forward. Exhale, start to straighten through the front leg and bow Parshvottanasana. Inhale, low lunge. Exhale, lengthen through the front leg as much as it's able or willing. There are certain days that your body will be more willing than others to let go and to stretch. Inhale, bend the front knee, look forward. Exhale, lengthen. And of course, that could be due to hormones, stress, hydration, effort, all the things, different time of the day that you're practicing.
So we just kind of see how the body is. Inhale forward to low lunge. And then we say, okay, that's where I'm at right now. And we try really hard not to judge it as best we can. Because if we notice one more time, inhale, low lunge, that we've got days that are tighter, then of course there must be days that we're a little bit looser and a little bit more flexible as well, or a little bit more balanced. We just, I think, don't notice those as easily. And then inhale, low lunge, lower your right knee to the ground. Move your hips back, walk your hands up on top of your left leg. Make sure that your right knee feels, relatively comfortable. And then we're going to slide your left leg out to the side. Now, I have a relatively open straddle. And so for me, when my leg is this far out to the left, my hips are still facing forward. For a lot of you, your leg is going to have to be quite a bit more in front of kind of a full center split, and that's great. So wherever your pelvis can be facing straight forward, then you find your straddle, reach your arms up to the ceiling. As you exhale, left hand comes down to the left thigh. And you start sliding that left hand down towards the shin in your side bend, gate pose, Parigasana. Nice big opening. On this side, see if you can press your entire right shin into the floor. So not just the knee, not just the toe, the foot, but the entire shin. Some aspects of your shin are not going to be in contact with the ground. Can it still press down? Go ahead, come all the way back up, reach both arms up to the ceiling. Keep your right shin pressing down. See if that helps you pull your left foot forward. Hands come down onto the blocks, tuck the back toes, lift the back knee up. And then let's come into your high lunge, reaching the arms first up to the ceiling just to find a little bit of balance, right? A little bit of tradition in your high lunge, right? This is where we would normally put the arms. And then go ahead, have the hands coming onto the pelvis to kind of play for a moment. And so notice in this high lunge, the pelvis is not upright, right? The pelvis is probably tipping forward a little bit here because it's a back bend, right? We've discussed this. So go ahead and bend your back knee. And then do what you can to upright your pelvis fully. So we are kind of pulling the front hip bones up and driving the back of the pelvis down. And you can do that in a few ways. We won't get into it tonight or today, depending on when you're practicing, but just kind of notice that you have control or choice, maybe is a better word, over how to place your hips. And then can you find with your right hand, your right buttock, and can you engage the right buttock more? You may have to poke it to kind of help the brain connect deeper to that muscle, but see if you can actively engage your right butt. And then as you keep engaging that right butt, go ahead, straighten the right leg. So you've got right buttock, right quad, probably maybe a little wobble here and there, and that's fine. But your pelvis is almost, I'm going to say 100% yes, that your pelvis is tipped forward again, right? You may not feel it, but it kind of has to, right? For your leg to be this far behind you. Whoops, and there goes the balance. And then keep your right buttock and your right leg active, reach the arms up to the ceiling. Find that slinky, so kind of lower legs ground down, rib cage lifts up, maybe lift the sternum up towards the ceiling, finding a little bit of a back bend, right? Did your right buttock lose engagement? Can you find it again? Does your quad slacken, right? That back knee should be completely lengthened as best as you can while you're balancing in a high lunge, possibly looking up at the ceiling. Next time you exhale, bring your hands down onto the blocks, take the blocks off to the side of your mat and step back, downward facing dog. Inhale, come forward to plank position. Exhale, lower your knees. Inhale, shift your shoulders forward over your fingertips. Exhale, slowly lower your torso down to the floor. Baby cobra, curl the chest forward and up. Exhale, lower the face. Inhale, prepare. Exhale, press up, hands and knees. Tuck the toes, lift the hips, downward facing dog. About 3 breaths here. Finding some stillness, finding some stability. Trying to slow the breath down a little bit.
Okay. We're going to lift the right leg up, down dog split. See if you can find the right buttock contracting, right? You don't have a hand to tap into the right butt, but imagine you did. And could your right buttock engage even more? Take a breath in. Exhale, swing your right foot forward in between your hands. If it doesn't get there on its own, get it as far forward as you can. Reach back for the ankle with your right hand and then help your right foot forward. Blocks might come back up underneath the hands. Take a breath in as you look forward, low lunge. Exhale, step your left foot forward to meet your right foot and fold over your legs. Inhale, reach your arms out to the side, up to the ceiling, upward hand pose. Exhale, mountain pose, arms by your sides. If you feel comfortable closing your eyes, go ahead and do so. Otherwise, soften the gaze so that your eyes are not sort of seeking balance, and just feel into the body. Where do you feel like there's been some effort that might be a little bit new? How is the body doing energetically? Right? Does the body feel like, oh, yeah, opening up, getting some back bending in, feeling energized? Or is the body starting to say, like, you know what, I'm a little tired. I don't know if I want to do back bending, right? Kind of finding that like internal wisdom or intelligence in the body at this point in practice. Right. Next time you inhale, reach the arms out to the side, up to the ceiling, upward hand pose. Again, we're going to find that little back bend. So feet press down, rib cage lifts up, chest starts to lift up. Maybe you look up between the hands, right? And so as you're doing this time, we're going to take the hands to cup the back of the skull so that your head has a little bit more support. So interlacing the hands behind your neck, rather than having the elbows wide, right? All like sort of like a like old school gym crunches, have your elbows completely narrowed, more like horse blinders. And then let your head rest in the lap of your hands so that your elbows are pointing maybe to where the ceiling meets the wall. And so hopefully this feels a little bit more sustainable. Now, for those of you who are either a little bit newer to back bends or who might have some tightness in the front of your hips, notice that the easiest way to do this with your elbows pointing up toward the ceiling meets the wall is to let your butt tip backwards and it arches the lower back. It actually closes the front of your hips, right? It doesn't allow your hips to stretch in the front of the groin. And oftentimes, this is what people feel is quote unquote crunching in the lower back or compression. And so, for a moment, bend your knees, come into your cat spine. So, you're going to round, look down at your feet, let your hands stay on your head. Don't pull the head, just let them be a gentle weight and just take a moment here. As you inhale, come back up to standing vertically. Engage your legs. So, we're going to actually tighten your thighs and tighten the glutes. In order to stand upright, you don't have to do those things, but we're going to activate the legs. And so as you engage the quads and the glutes, hopefully there's a feeling of sort of the thighs moving back, but the pelvis moving forward. And that might feel a little esoteric, but just kind of go with it for now. So now, thighs moving back, glutes moving the pelvis forward, lift up through your slinky, start to lift your chest up towards where the ceiling meets the wall so that your elbows kind of point that direction. And see if you can keep your pelvis kind of moving forward without moving the weight into the balls of the feet, right? Which is tricky. So thighs moving back, quads are engaged, glutes engaged, helping keep the pelvis forward-ish, lifting the chest, pointing the elbow tips up towards where the ceiling meets the wall, ground through your heels. And just notice, it might feel more effortful, but hopefully a lot less crunchy in the lower back. This is your camel option if you don't like being in a kneeling position. So keep this in your back pocket. You can go a little higher if you want to, and if you can, where your elbows start actually pointing up at the ceiling. But again, glutes pressing the hips forward, thighs pressing the thighs backwards, lifting up and out of the waist, maybe curling the chest over the shoulder blades as if the shoulder blades become sort of a platform for your chest to rest on. And then let's come back up to neutral, find mountain pose. Arms can rest out by your sides. Eyes might close or just soften, and see if you can feel if you're vertical or if you're a little forward bent or if you're still in a little bit of a back bend. It can be a little bit tricky sometimes to know what vertical is after being in a back bend or a forward bend for a period of time. Okay, let's come up into upward hand pose. So reach the arms out to the side, up to the ceiling. Lift the chest. Exhale, dive forward over the legs, standing forward, bend, hands to floor or blocks. Take a moment to bend the knees, drop the head here. Might feel just a little sticky. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. Exhale, bend your knees, step your right foot back, up and over your mat, low lunge. Inhale, lower your right knee down to the ground, point the back toes if that feels okay for your ankle and your knee. And then if you've got blocks, flip your blocks up onto their highest height so that they're kind of right around your ankle. Hopefully the hands can be relatively flat so that we can bend your left knee more over the toes as opposed to the ankles. We're coming into Anjaneyasana or crescent lunge. And so we're letting your front ankle bend, letting the knee go over the toes, maybe even past the toes. You might have to adjust where your back leg is. And what we're looking for is, can we get some length in the right groin? This is as far as we're gonna go right today. So you have a lot of support underneath your hands. If you feel like you have bent your front knee to where you can, but you're not really feeling much, you can back your hips up a little bit. I'm gonna move this block so you can see my foot. Pull your foot back about a half a step, and then try allowing your knee to bend forward again. So if I move the block so that you can kind of see my foot, I'm effectively in chair pose, sort of, or a yoga squat. So I've got a bend at my ankle because my shin is going forward of perpendicular. My knee is quite bent, it's relatively closed. And that way my hips are sort of moving down and forward towards my front foot, which requires quite a bit of bend at the ankle, the knee, and the hip. If you feel pinching in the hip, back your hips up a little bit, right? That comes with time and practice because we don't often bring the knee this close to the chest, unless we're on our back pulling our knees to the chest. And so we have to learn how to do that in different positions. Let's take one or two more breaths here. If you're feeling pretty good here, press down through your hands, lift the chest, and then just think about that, lifting the sternum up towards where the ceiling meets the wall, and see if you can do that and engage your right buttock at the same time. Hopefully you get a kind of a lovely sort of kind of deep stretch in the low belly, kind of front of the hip area, right? It could be a lot of different things. Some people would call this a psoas stretch. It could be, absolutely, it could be your psoas. It could also just be a lot of other stuff. And so low belly, front of the groin stretch, keep it kind of vague to allow for all the possibilities of what could actually be lengthening. Okay, let's move the hips back. Take the blocks off to the side, tuck the back toes, lift the hips, and then downward facing dog. Inhale, come forward to plank position. Exhale, lower the knees. Inhale, shift your shoulders or your fingertips. Exhale, slowly lower to the floor. And then we're gonna come into as big of a back bend as you would like to. So you're gonna come into your baby cobra, and then you might push your hands down and lift your chest up a little higher. The only thing I ask, well, there's a lot of things I ask for, right, is that your pelvis stays grounded either on the mat or the blanket. So we're not doing upward dog where the pelvis is off the ground. And so your back bend here, whether it's low, medium, or high, is about the spine bending and not as much about the hips bending off the floor, if that makes sense. So go ahead, lower down. If you like, you can bring your hands forward a little bit. It makes it slightly less aggressive. And then inhale, come into your baby cobra, push down through your hands, lift the chest. Your elbows may or may not straight. It's absolutely okay if your elbows are bent. If your elbows are bent and your shoulders are up, see if you can keep the elbows bent,
but lower your shoulders so that, again, you're more in a stable position as opposed to a hanging position. If your elbows are straight, same thing. There are times when hanging is fine, right? It's a choice, right? And particularly, it can be a really nice choice. But right now, we're looking for active back bending and stable back bending. So you're going to allow your shoulders to re-engage with the rib cage. Right? We bring them back into the fold, and that way we have shoulder stability, so that we can kind of manipulate you into a better back bend, or a more controlled back bend, I should say. And then go ahead, lower down. Take a breath in. Place your hands underneath your shoulders if they were moved forward. Exhale, move up and back, hands and knees. And then move through cat-cow gently 3 times. Inhale, start with cow spine, looking up towards the ceiling. Exhale, cat spine, looking down. And this might feel a little sticky. So just go nice and slow. There's no reason to create like a whiplash effect in the spine. Inhale, look forward, cow spine. Exhale, cat spine, rounding. Push through the hands, push through the shins. Let that help stabilize you. Inhale, cow spine. Exhale, cat spine. And then tuck the toes, lift the hips, downward facing dog. Adho Mukha Svanasana. We're going to bring your feet all the way up to the top of your mat, step by step, bending your knees as you need to. Hands on blocks, forward bend. Inhale, flat back, chest moves forward. Exhale, fold back down. Bend the knees, step your left foot back, low lunge, lower your back knee to the ground. And so let's start to do Anjaneyasana on this side. So again, foot could maybe slide back just a smidge or two. And then we're going to allow the knee to move past the ankle and over the toes. There, in a lot of communities of movement, right? Not just yoga, but like Pilates, personal training, those kind of things. There's sometimes discussions of like, never let the knees go over the ankle, which is just simply not functional, right? When we get up off the toilet or off of a chair, oftentimes our knees are past our ankle because it moves our center of gravity forward. And so unless you've got really specific knee pain, this is okay to do, generally speaking. Obviously, if you've got knee stuff, talk to a medical provider about a true assessment. But in general, we put the knees over the toes when we bend sometimes. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing to do when you're in a yoga practice, right? And so as you do that, you might start to feel the ankle bending, the knee bending, the hip bending. And that might allow you to get a little bit more into the front of the left hip groin area, especially if you can engage your left buttock. And then if you're feeling okay there, excuse me, and you can lift the chest a little, make sure the left glute is engaged and find a little bit of this crescent shape where your left buttock is helping press your left hip forward. And then there's this little bit of a rebound into this chest lift, giving you this back bend. And so breathing here a few moments, finding that deep, maybe psoas stretch, maybe something else. Could be organ, could be hip socket, could be abdomen in terms of abdominal muscle, could be upper quad. So many options, so many things in that region. Okay, and then start to move the hips back. This time, rather than coming to downward dog, we're gonna bring your right shin back on the blanket to meet your left shin. And then if you feel comfortable sitting on your feet in Vajrasana, that's great. If not, you can just kind of keep leaning forward just to take a couple breaths, right? And then we'll set up for camel. Okay. So for camel, you want your legs hip distance apart.
That's real important, right? Camel with your legs together is super unstable and congestive for your pelvis. So you're going to separate your legs hip distance, maybe a smidge wider, right? Depending on how you're feeling. You can play around with going just wider than your hip distance if you would like to. And then you're going to take your blocks, and this may take some blanket rearranging. We want to place the blocks on their highest height around the ankle, not necessarily around the toes, but really around the ankle. So for me, I need to move my mat forward, excuse me, my blanket forward, so that my blanket is really only under the top half of my shin. And so that way my ankle bone is here. I can place the block at my ankle so that my ankle is centered and the block is on the ground and not on the blanket. And we have one of each of those, right and left. And you want the blocks actually, I would say touching the ankles themselves or the feet. So they're in contact, right? And then the first things first, you're gonna bring your hands up onto your hips. And just like we did in high lunge, see if you can feel the ability to upright your pelvis. And so for most of us, because there's more of our body under or behind us, because there's really nothing in front of us, it makes our body worried that it's gonna fall forward. It's possible that you could, right? And so that's why our hips kind of go back, and it helps us orient to where the ground is. We're eventually going to be going backwards. So I'm going to have you engage your glutes and push your pelvis gently, kind of nudge it forward so that your thighs are as perpendicular to the floor as possible. And so as you do that, you might start to feel like your feet lift off the ground a little bit. And so press your shins down. That's your quads, technically speaking. It's a little bit of foot and shin, right? You do have muscles that kind of just ground the feet and push them into the floor. But really, if you get your whole shin down, as if you could push your shins so far through the floor that your legs would straighten, right? Which would be amazing if you could do that. But that's your quad. So we've got a little bit of quad by pressing the shins down. We've got glutes moving the pelvis forward. You're gonna lift your rib cage up out of your waist, right? You can keep your hands on your hips for a second and then start to lift the chest towards where the ceiling meets the wall. And again, here's camel. This may be where you end, and that's great, right? If you want to take it further and break whenever you need to, if you want to take it further, keep the glutes engaged. The minute those guys relax, you're out of camel, right? So you got to keep your glutes engaged. Then you might reach your fingertips and your hands back to the blocks, and that pulls your whole body backwards, right? But we still want your pelvis relatively over your knees. And so we're going to move your pelvis again forward from your glutes and lift the chest up and back, keeping your eyes forward. We're not going to drop the head back today. That's not this practice. We haven't talked enough about that yet. Okay, to come out of this, one hand comes onto the pelvis, other hand comes onto the pelvis. You push the pelvis down to lift your chest up, and then either sit back on your heels. You may have to move the blocks a little bit, or come onto hands and knees and just be in neutral for a second. Take a couple breaths. Maybe come into child's pose for everyone. So separate the knees wide, slide the hands forward. We're trying to keep the spine relatively neutral so that we're not, again, bouncing too quickly back and forth between a sustained back bend and a forward bend. Tends to create a little bit of confusion in aspects of the spine. And so do we just want to be gentle with the spine when we're asking it to bend in a direction that it doesn't do a whole lot of, which is backwards. Excuse me. So we're just going to do one more camel and then we'll be done, right? Because you've basically done aspects of camel for almost an hour. And so we're going to come back up. Legs are parallel, hip distance apart, if not a little wider. Hands to the hips. Got to set the foundation up first. Shins pressing down. Glutes pressing the hips forward. Lifting the rib cage up, keeping the eyes forward, right? We're not looking up to the ceiling. And so the chest is sort of trying to chase the chin as you lift it up. And then notice, or have your glutes disengaged already? Can you reactivate them? Keeping the thighs as much over the pelvis, keeping the pelvis as much over the knees as possible, and then reach the hands back onto the blocks. Keep the shins pressing down, keep the glutes pressing forward. And then can think about, even though your hands are on the blocks or, hopefully, or they're on your pelvis, can the chest still think about reaching up to the ceiling as opposed to dripping down towards the floor? And then to come out, one hand to the pelvis, other hand to the pelvis, push the pelvis down to come up, hands and knees, downward facing dog. This will be our last downward facing dog of practice. Bend the knees generously because this is not meant to really be a spine stretch. It's supposed to be a spine lengthener. And then just let your hips drift a little bit to the right and a little bit to the left. And go back and forth a few times, just kind of getting a little bit of length through the side body. Great. And then let's come into a wide knee child's pose. So knees wide, toes together, arms reaching forward. And come on up to sit. So we're going to set up for our relaxation pose. Sometimes it can be tricky to go from a back bend straight into corpse pose, particularly if you have back stuff. And so we're going to do Supta Baddha Konasana instead. If Supta Baddha Konasana doesn't work for you, you can absolutely straighten your legs. It's great. Or you can put your legs up over a chair for legs on a chair. If that's an unfamiliar pose, there is a recording of that. And I'm sure it will come up in other classes. So blanket for the head. I'm going to turn around, have blocks one on either side of you, lay on your back, position the blanket so that it is just underneath your skull, not underneath your shoulders, and then bring feet together, open the knees apart, and place the blocks in such a way where you feel like your legs are fully supported, so pretty high up towards your thigh bones. I like having my hands on my belly for a lot of the end postures, partly because it feels really grounding to me. Some people feel like they get better grounding with their arms out to the side and a better shoulder drop. So it's a kind of a personal preference, kind of choose what you like. And then either let your eyes stay really soft if they're going to be open, or let them close. Take a few mindful breaths. So watch the breath come in, see if their ribs can expand. And watch the breath go out. Notice how they sort of recoil into themselves. And again, inhale, ribs expand. Let that soften the lower back. If there's any talkativeness, exhale, recoil. Inhale, ribs expand. And exhale, recoil. And then let the mind get nice and broad. So you don't have to think about anything particularly. You don't have to manipulate or watch the breath. We're just going to let the body rest for about 10 minutes.
So slowly bring your attention back to your breath. Slide your hands down to the outer thighs and use your hands to help close your legs together. So just don't overuse the inner thighs. And then know that you have props on either side of your legs. You're going to move one of the props out to the side so that you can roll onto your side as you exhale. Just kind of curl up on the side for a moment so you can kind of re-rest. And then using your hands, pressing into the floor, come on up to sit. Go ahead and sit on the blanket in a cross-legged position. You could have the right shin in front or the left. Your pelvis is elevated a little bit. Have the hands resting on the thighs. Let the spine be upright. So head is over rib cage over pelvis. Next time you inhale, drain the palms together in the center of the chest. As you exhale, bow the face down towards the fingertips. Act of gratitude for taking time to practice. May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be safe. Namaste.